Hi, Fun.
Hi, Amy. How are you?
Doing well, thanks. How are you?
Great, thanks. Um,
Nice.
yeah, I hope you don't mind that I joined a bit early just to make
Nope,
sure that things are squared away.
absolutely. I figured you may want to.
So let me actually just test sharing screen because I do
Okay.
want to do today a little bit differently than I've done it in the past.
Okay.
Let's see here. All right. Um, you all can see my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me
Yep.
just swap my display settings.
Looks beautiful.
Thank you. All right, I should be able to see everything relatively well now.
Excellent. Okay, now I see like a note screen on the right.
Oh, okay. So I want to change how that is going then. Thank you for letting
Okay.
me know.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here.
That looks beautiful.
Okay, now it's sharing what I
Great.
like to see. And yeah, let me see if I can still get to my notes screen. Nope. Okay, great. I think I'm seeing what I want to see now,
Good.
and you all
Good,
can
good.
see the regular presentation?
Yep. Absolutely. Hmm.
Okay, excellent. How many folks attend
Well,
your
we've
meetings?
We've been unable to send the reminder email for the last several months, so it's been falling off a little. It used to be up to 60, but because we haven't been able to send the reminder emails, it was like 20 last month. So we shall see, but we'll be able to send reminder emails going forward, and I'll send out the information about where the presentation is posted so folks can view it online as needed.
Okay, fabulous.
Hmm.
Well, there's going to be a slightly different version that we want to share with the audience after the meeting. So we were wondering if it's possible if we can get that to you sometime by the end of the month. I actually
Okay,
head out on vacation right after this presentation. So, um, yeah, we just want to make sure that we have the best version that we can for users
right,
when the presentation isn't attached.
right.
But yeah, we're feeling good that we should be able to provide some version of this presentation to the group. Um,
Fantastic.
yeah. I was just curious, how did
Mhm.
you find out about this project?
I believe that Hillary Olivos Rude and probably Amina Foster both had information on it and reached out to you about it.
Oh, nice.
So yeah,
Yeah, we have a lot of different stakeholders for this
right.
project. It's interesting
Yes,
knowing who is interested in learning more.
right. I have to
Yeah, I've worked
forward the meeting to someone right now. She's following up on it.
awesome.
Okay. Hi, Dale.
Yeah, to help with the presentation, I was wondering if it may be possible, for you to help keep track of the raised hands.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
fabulous. And
Mm-hmm.
because this topic encompasses so many things, we also anticipate there may be some
Right.
questions we need to look into before
Mm-hmm.
we return to the group.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you could help us with those and
Right.
facilitate collection of those questions, that would
Yeah,
be fabulous.
definitely. We can collect those in our email, and we can send the answers to them in our follow-up email.
Wonderful. These were little things Eric and I thought
Sure.
of when we were doing rehearsal.
Absolutely. Oops, sorry. Welcome, Eric. Hi, Tiffany.
Hey there.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
I didn't catch what you guys were talking
Okay, we were
about
talking.
exactly, but I wanted to ask a question though first, Amy,
Right,
because you had mentioned that the listserv stuff is kind of delayed because of the
right.
DAS stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So those questions might not get out timely,
We're
maybe.
working on consolidating that list now and getting it available
Okay,
soon.
perfect.
So we hope to be able to send them out as usual after this
Oh,
meeting.
great. Great. Fantastic.
Thanks, Tiffany. And Fun asked for us to monitor for hand raises. And I presume also questions in the chat.
Great.
Yes, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I'm gonna put some links in the chat before I forget while folks are still joining. Goodness. Thanks everyone who's joining. I'm just putting some info in the chat, so bear with me. Okay, we'll just allow one more minute for additional folks to join. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello and good afternoon on behalf of the Oregon Project Management Advisory Board. Welcome to our Project Management User Group presentation of the month. My name is Amy Croucher, Chair of the Oregon Project Management Advisory Board, and I will be facilitating our meeting today. We'd like to start with a few housekeeping items. As you may have noticed, this meeting is being recorded. Please mute your phone or PC if not speaking to help reduce any background noise. If you're not speaking, you are encouraged to remain off camera. A link to the meeting resources will be shared shortly after today's session and posted on the DAS YouTube channel and OPMAB website. If you have any questions or comments, please raise your digital hand and Vaughn or Eric will pause and respond periodically during the presentation. The Oregon Project Management Advisory Board has an opening for a board member position. For more information and to apply, use the link in the chat. Also, if you're interested in business analyst processes, the Business Analyst Networking Group meets during months in which PMUG does not meet. For more information, visit the BANG website posted in the chat. The Agile Community Practice is also an OPMAB initiative that meets every month or so. For information, their website is also posted in the chat. You're welcome to share with your colleagues and are encouraged to spread the word on our PMUG Wednesday sessions. I'm pleased to host this session presented by Hung Von Nguyen and Eric Main. Hung Von Nguyen is the first environmental justice policy and program coordinator for the state of Oregon. She supports the Oregon Environmental Justice Council, which is the governor's council responsible for developing the environmental justice mapping tool and developing policy guidance for its usage. She has about 20 years of experience in public service, specializing in program development, management consulting, and community engagement. She coordinates over 16 state agencies as lead of the Environmental Justice Council Liaison Team and leads the Oregon Environmental Justice Mapping Tool Leadership Team. Also, Eric Main is the environmental justice lead at the Oregon Health Authority. He has 25 years of experience developing community level environmental and human health indicators as a research analyst with the Oregon Tracking Program and as an urban planner prior to joining OHA. He currently leads the methodology work group in the development of the Oregon Environmental Justice Mapping Tool, which includes subject matter experts from the state agencies, Metro, local public health, and academic partners. The methodology work group provides recommendations to the Oregon Environmental Justice Council on the structure, content, visualizations, and reporting of the EJ mapping tool. Without further ado, please take it away, Vun and Eric.
Thank you so much, Amy, for kicking this off. And thank you for introducing our project. We are so pleased to meet the project management user group for the very first time today and also share the work that we are doing. So this screen is just a high level of what we're hoping to share with you today before we jump into the official agenda. We want to talk about how this project came to be, current progress, what's next, and we will go through some of the details of the project to share how we are going about our particular project. The official agenda is as follows. We will first do an introduction of the EJ mapping tool and how it fits in the state landscape. Then we'll cover project development stages, which include the mapping tool development itself, the policy guidance development, as well as how we envision implementation will go. Next, we will go into community engagement strategies. And lastly, we would love to share resources with you so that you can look into the project after our presentation. You might note that there is a raised hand with an arrow pointing to it. This is what it's going to look like when we're ready for questions as we progress through the presentation. And every time there is that black hand there, we intend to pause for questions, and we'd love to hear your thoughts and be happy to have a dialogue with you all. So let's go into an overall introduction of the environmental justice mapping tool. This tool is being created based on guidance from House Bill 4077, which created the Environmental Justice Council and created a requirement to develop a environmental justice mapping tool in Oregon. This tool is going to be a tool that will help state agencies identify which areas of the state are at higher risk of environmental and health burdens, identify who needs community engagement, and consider which communities need agency guidance and or resources. When you consider our West Coast states, California has a similar tool that they already have developed and implemented called CalEnviroScreen. And in Washington, their version of the environmental justice mapping tool is the environmental health disparities map. And why is it important to identify environmental justice communities? The reason why we need to identify them is because they are most at risk of environmental health burdens that can be impacted by various agency programs. By identifying these communities, they can be considered in addition to other criteria that relate to programs and other mapping tools that you may use. There's a moral imperative for us to take care of the most vulnerable. So let's look at how the mapping tool fits with agency programs. All agency programs are created by some sort of legislation or federal mandate. And from that, we implement these programs. We have related rulemakings and we develop policies. Some of these, some legislation also creates requirements for state agencies to create other mapping tools to support these programs. And the usage of the environmental justice mapping tool is meant to be in complement of all other mapping tools and the related programs coming out of state legislation and federal mandates. And at the end of the day, we're hoping this mapping tool can help state agencies fulfill their agency programs. Let's look at an overall summary of the mapping tool project. This project is very unique because it's not being led by a state agency. It's actually being led by the Oregon Environmental Justice Council, which is a council appointed by the governor of Oregon that meets 6 times a year to not only work on the mapping project, but also advise state agencies on how to implement their environmental justice programs. The requirement to build this tool does come out of House Bill 4077, and the due date for this tool is December 31st, 2027. Potential users include state agencies, local governments, and advocacy and community-based organizations. The scope of the project includes identifying environmental justice communities, developing statewide guidance for usage, and hosting 6 listening sessions. And the potential impacts of this tool include it being used as a tool for community engagement and used for consideration of community investment, such as grants, program creation, and program expansion. So let's look at the relationship between the Environmental Justice Mapping Tool Leadership Team and the Environmental Justice Council. The Environmental Justice Mapping Tool Leadership Team, which in some parts of the presentation I might abbreviate as EMTLT, is a group of multiple state agencies and academic institutions. They include the Department of Environmental Quality, Oregon Health Authority, Department of Administrative Services, Oregon State University Institute for Natural Resources, and Portland State University Population Research Center. These agencies come together to create the leadership team. And in this leadership team, we have work groups to identify and work specific parts of the project, including the Environmental Justice Council liaisons. This is a team of representatives from the 16 somewhat state agencies who come together to work on deliverables like their annual reports. They also are the communication arm for their agencies relating to the mapping tool project. The methodology team is a team that Eric leads. They work on developing the indicators, are going to work on creating the indices, and they are working on much of the nuts and bolts as far as how the project is coming together. The inventory team is related to the data side of the house, and that is a team that's led by Melissa Foltz in DAS. And we also have a community engagement team that's currently working on how we're going to be working on the community engagement strategies in the next biennium. And this team is led as a team of Eric, myself, and Oregon Health Authority. I lead I'm the coordinator for the Environmental Justice Council, and I'm a one-person team for all the council business. My job is in partnership with the governor's office. We do have an advisor that is assigned to the council, and I also lead the overall efforts for the mapping tool leadership team as well as the liaison team. So another way to think about the reason why we need to identify vulnerable communities is a concept called meaningful involvement, as stated in House Bill 4077. Meaningful involvement's purpose is to facilitate public involvement with communities impacted by government's decisions so that these communities can influence the decision makers. And there are 4 distinct elements to meaningful involvement, which is the goal the Environmental Justice Council has for all state agencies. And this includes element 1, public involvement can influence decision making. Decision makers seek out and facilitate involvement of vulnerable populations. Concerns of communities can influence the decision maker's decision. And lastly, vulnerable communities have opportunities to participate in proposed activities that impact their environment or health. So looking at the formal definition of environmental justice community, we created a visual to represent the portions of the definition in the House Bill. These include communities of color, communities experiencing lower incomes, tribal communities, rural communities, remote communities, coastal communities, communities with limited infrastructure, and other communities traditionally underrepresented in public processes and adversely harmed by environmental and health hazards, including seniors, youth, and persons with disabilities. Oregon's definition of environmental justice community is very broad so that we can look at more communities that could be vulnerable to create more opportunities for public participation. And at this slide, I would like to pause for any questions that our audience may have.
I don't see any questions or hands raised. I think we're okay to move on.
Awesome, thank you, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
So this next slide introduces the project stages. The stages include mapping tool development, which is where we're at right now. We'll also talk about what we envision the policy guidance development will look like and what implementation can look like. And to introduce mapping tool development, I wanted to share the various groups that are involved in this process. First, we're going to start with the Environmental Justice Council. As the body that's responsible for the project, they were responsible for approving the decision points and providing feedback and approvals for each of the decision points as they proceed. We'll be going into them in more detail in the presentation. There's also an interagency collaboration dynamic. That is the work that's happening in all of our subgroups, but also the work that we're doing to solicit feedback from state agencies listed in House Bill 4077. The roles include indicator selection and development, and also data collection and refinement. And lastly, there's a community engagement component to mapping tool development as well, because we want to make sure that the work we're doing actually can benefit communities. So what we're doing in this particular stage of development, when we're reaching out to communities, is we're asking for feedback about potential indicators. And when we get later in the project, we're going to ask for feedback regarding the beta tool that will eventually be available. This next slide is about our completed decision points, and I'm going to pivot to my colleague, Eric, to kick this off.
Don, thank you so much for teeing up this portion of the presentation. Hey all, I hope you're having a good day. Coming to an end. Yeah, so the environmental justice mapping tool will be a composite index. You might be familiar with the term composite index as it relates to things like stock portfolios or, terms like the NASDAQ composite index. Well, a composite index is a single numeric value or score that represents the combination of multiple indicators. The Oregon Environmental Justice Mapping Tool will be a composite index of cumulative impacts. And I'm happy to go into more detail about what cumulative impacts are during the Q&A if it comes up. In December 2023, the Methodology Work Group identified 10 decision points for the Environmental Justice Council to consider. The decision points came from best practices for developing a geographic composite index. The first 6 decision points were adopted by the EJ Council in 2024 and include decision point number 1, domain selection. I'll discuss indicator domains in the following slides. Decision point number 2, geographic units. For the purpose of the tool, communities will be defined by census tracts. We recommended census tracts because it includes a base population that allows us to easily calculate rates for the indicators. Decision point 3, geographic designation and comparisons. And once again, I'll discuss this decision point in more detail in following slides. Decision point number 4, domains and indicator weights. Weights will be considered for indicators based on the amount of variability in the scores and community priorities. What I mean by the amount of variability is if some communities are experiencing concerns more than other communities, there's a possibility that those indicators will get additional weights over indicators where the environmental conditions are similar across the state. Decision point number 5, domain aggregation. Domains will be aggregated using a combination of additive and multiplicative methods. Decision point number 6, data standardization. Indicator scores will be standardized using z-scores to allow for more accurate comparisons than quantiles or percentiles. Next slide. Thank you, Vaughn. The first decision point is the selection of domains or categories that indicators will be grouped in. There's language in House Bill 4077 that help guide domain and subdomain recommendations. So the domains will be split into 2. Those are place and people. Under the place domain will be 4 subdomains. Those include environmental exposures, environmental hazards, the built environment, and climate change risks. And under the people domain are social and demographic factors and human health. Environmental exposures include things in the environment that we're exposed to every day, like air pollution or drinking water contaminants. Environmental hazards include things in the environment that we might not be exposed to every day, but serve as potential stressors or create barriers to enjoying certain aspects of our community. A good example of this is impaired water bodies. If you have impaired water bodies in your community, it might act as a barrier to you recreating in a river or lake, and can even act as a barrier to being able to consume fish from that water body. Climate change risks include conditions made worse by our changing climate, like wildfire risk, drought, or flooding. The built environment includes characteristics of communities that affect our behaviors, like access to healthcare, healthy food options, and access to parks. Within the people domain, we have human health disparities that include things like chronic disease prevalence and access to health insurance. Examples of chronic disease prevalence might include diabetes, diseases of the circulatory system or the respiratory system. And one thing to note, these are diseases that can either be caused or exacerbated by environmental exposures. Social factors include potential characteristics like household income, educational attainment, or people in the community living with a disability. For decision point number 3, the council adopted the recommendation to build a statewide index and additional indexes for communities designated as large city, small city, rural, remote, and coastal. And there's language in House Bill 4077 that supports these designations. By including these multiple indexes in the tool, this allows agencies to compare communities with economic and geographic similarities. It also allows us to circumvent criticisms about the tool being too rural-centric or too urban-centric. And these criticisms have been experienced by states that currently have tools that are in use. Example of those are CalEnviroScreen and Washington's Environmental Health Disparities Map. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide just shows how users will be able to access the different indexes. So you'll be able to click on, in the tool, which index that you would like to use for your purposes. I should state that the statewide Environmental Justice Index was one that came highly recommended from our state agencies because it's mandatory for some of their work. Next slide. We just completed indicator recommendations, which include 75 priority indicators, and we're now working on indicator development. I say 75 priority indicators because there were over 100 indicators that were recommended, but some were deprioritized because they were duplicative of other indicators recommended, or the data didn't fit our indicator selection criteria. We anticipate having 58 indicators submitted by the end of next week, which will get us to around 77% completion. I would like to say that that is breaking news. That's the first time Vaughn has heard that, but we had a great meeting today with the methodology work group, and we have a lot of indicator submissions rolling in. In the fall, we will conduct a sensitivity analysis of the indicators and report out to the Environmental Justice Council, along with information we receive through community outreach that support the indicators. We are planning to include no more than 42 core environmental justice index indicators in the mapping tool. By limiting the number of indicators, it helps prevent the tool from becoming too unwieldy. So if you include all 75 indicators, it would be really challenging to identify which indicator is driving that community into that environmental justice higher score. Next slide, please. After core environmental justice indicators are adopted by the EJA Council, we will work with the council to set EJ community thresholds and design of the mapping tool and website. Next slide. Oh, yes, let me follow up on that. And so we're expecting the release of the tool to be close to the end of 2027. Next slide.
Amy, are there any questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not even see the hand. Thank you, Vaughn.
I'm not seeing any, but Tiffany has her hand up.
I actually do have a question. Is it in your specs to to kind of loop this in to the open data portal and Oregon.gov, that aspect of it too, once it's completed?
Boy, that's a really great question. I think that is going to be up to DAS. The tool development itself will be done by Oregon State University Institute for Natural Resources and will be available on the Data Explorer. The data will also be available through a tool that is being developed by Portland State University that will allow the EJ Council and others to kind of play around with changing up indicator scores. And now beyond that, the indicators themselves, I think that it really depends on DAS's plans for data and indicator and metadata standards. So yeah, I certainly will make the data available, but yeah, that will be a DAS decision.
And if I may add, Melissa Foltz, who is part of Enterprise Information Services in DAS, she is part of our project team. So when we get to that stage of the project, I'm quite certain this is going to be something that is going to be collaborated on and ultimately discussed. So we haven't gone that far yet, but we do have a member in the team who is certainly more knowledgeable in this particular process with the Open Data Portal project and all that's related with that.
Yeah, I suspect ultimately it'll come down to whether the indicators meet the framework standards. Yeah. Any other questions?
Thank you. I'm not seeing any hands up or questions in the chat. I think we can move on.
All right, final slide for me. So we're not working on the Oregon Environmental Justice Mapping Tool in a bubble. We meet quarterly with other states that either have an environmental justice mapping tool or are working on a tool, and these are very robust conversations. We talk about everything from community outreach to very specific details about how indicators are calculated. We also meet monthly with EPA Region 10 states to discuss more general environmental justice topics, and Vaughn leads that group. And finally, the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine are providing guidance through meetings following an environmental justice mapping tool development guide that a group of academics that worked on CGIST, the Climate and Environmental Justice Tool. And the name of that guide is called Constructing Valid Geospatial Tools for Environmental Justice. And those meetings started up in April, but they are quickly coming to an end as the project timeline is running out. Thank you.
Thanks
Back
so
to you,
much,
Vaughn.
Eric.
Thank
And
you,
I would like
Eric.
to note that this report is actually available in the resources portion of our presentation for anyone who's interested in checking that out later. All right, let's go into policy guidance. This is a portion of the project that right now is really theoretical because we want to have substantive process in the development before we really dive in deep here. That being said, we do have an overall skeleton of how we expect this to work. And we do know based on House Bill 4077 what the tool it can do and what it can't do. So looking at the various parties that will be participating in policy development or be an interested party, the Environmental Justice Council will be responsible for approving the interim policy framework or development based on what comes out of our community engagement strategies, as well as interagency collaboration with our state agencies. They are also ultimately responsible for approving the final policy that will accompany the tool. When you think about the state agencies that are involved, They'll be contributing use cases for the mapping tool and the different scenarios in which it makes sense. They will also identify related legislation because there is some state level legislation that mandates the use of the environmental justice mapping tool with certain agency processes. And lastly, we will be leaning into our state agencies to give us periodic feedback on the policies that are being developed based on the use cases received and work with the council. Communities will also have an opportunity to opine on the potential statewide policies by sharing feedback on the various use cases and giving us feedback on the interim policy so that we can share that feedback with the Environmental Justice Council before they make final policy approvals. So let's take a look at what the tool can do and what it can't do. But before we go into this, it is helpful to understand who the users of the tool are. That includes the primary users, which are our state agencies. And we also expect other users such as local governments, advocacy organizations, and the public. What the tool can do and what the guidance can do is provide purposes and use cases for usage. The tool can guidance can also share how to identify environmental justice communities and how to facilitate meaningful involvement. The tool itself can be considered for community engagement and project investment. And the guidance ideally will also identify other legislation that requires consideration of Oregon's environmental justice mapping tool. What it can't do is create specific guidance for individual state programs. The reason for that is if we were to do that, we'd probably never get done with the policy guidance because with every individual state agencies, there's countless number of programs available. So what we're hoping to do with the use cases is provide examples that could be applicable to as many state agencies and programs as possible. That being said, it is possible for the Environmental Justice Council to provide formal consultation to state agencies with the formal consultation request process. Something also really important to understand about the Environmental Justice Mapping Tool is in House Bill 4077, there is a prohibition for using the mapping tool for regulatory purposes. So we do want to make sure we're not creating guidance that is related to permitting and enforcement. And lastly, we can't create any policies that are in conflict with federal, state, and local laws. And I would like to pause here for any questions anyone may have.
I don't see any hands raised. I'll look in the chat quickly. I don't see any questions in the chat. I think we're okay to move on.
Awesome, thank you.
Mhm.
We're getting to the home stretch, folks. So we wanted to identify the state agencies that are listed in House Bill 4077 as natural resources agencies. And we have DEQ and OHA and asterisks because they are also providing a leadership capacity in the development of the environmental justice mapping tool. Our agencies who are listed as natural resources agencies are incredibly diverse. And it is really different to have that big group of agencies listed as natural resources agencies because in Washington, for instance, they only have 6. So Oregon is creating a bigger umbrella of agencies that should be considering environmental justice in their operations and using the environmental justice mapping tool. So let's look at implementation roles, which is the last main section of our presentation today. The Environmental Justice Council's role in implementation is to improve an implementation plan and to review and reflect on evaluations coming from state agencies and Oregon communities. State agencies, which include our lead agencies in the leadership team, will be developing the environmental justice mapping tool implementation plan. They'll ultimately be executing the implementation plan, and they will be working with state agencies so state agencies can evaluate what they think about the tool and provide useful feedback. We'll also be working with communities to do overall outreach when we implement. And we are also hoping that community members have the ability to evaluate the effectiveness and if they believe that this tool can help them understand the communities better. Looking further into the evaluations and reflections, we do want to make sure our stakeholders have the ability to learn about the tool from an overall outreach perspective. But we also want to hear what our users think so that we can relay that information to the Environmental Justice Council. The reason why that's so important is there is expected to be future development stages. And in order to do that, it's going to be super important to learn from our previous iterations. And ultimately, all the feedback that's received and synthesized by the council will turn into recommendations for the next round. We hope to enhance the tool every 4 years. And we hope to refresh the data in the tool every 2 years. So these are the overall implementation stages after the initial development. First, we'll work on outreach planning, where we identify and categorize users so we can develop a communication plan and outreach materials for each. We'll also want to create outreach materials for secondary and other users and create user and technical guides. After we do our outreach planning, then we're doing our stakeholder engagement, where we implement our comms plan. We promote our outreach materials, and we also hope to host information sessions with interested users so that they can learn more about the tool and be able to work with those of us who worked on the tool to have a better idea of how this tool can benefit their work. After we do our stakeholder engagement, we want to go into tool feedback solicitation. Some of the mechanisms we're hoping to use in this stage include interactive presentations, feedback forums, and or focus groups and one-on-one interviews. And lastly, we want to direct all the feedback back to the Environmental Justice Council through the leadership team so that they can synthesize all the feedback that they're receiving from the various users, and the council can consider some recommendations for the next stage of the tool. Do we have any questions?
I was just going to ask when, sorry, are there specific states that have these types of tools in place that one could reference to get a better idea of what we might be talking about here?
Sure. And actually, I'm going to punt this question over to Eric because he has had a lot of conversation with other tools about things that we are considering and all the lessons learned from previous implementations.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, there are several states, maybe 8, but only a handful, really, a small handful that really use the tool to shape policies and targeted like infrastructure investments. And the ones that come to the top, the oldest tool out there is Cal EnviroScreen. The Washington Environmental Health Disparities Map has a requirement where a certain portion of funding needs to be directed towards environmental justice communities. Colorado EnviroScreen has a tool that that is actually used for some regulatory purposes. It's a bit controversial in the state. A lot of lawsuits have flared up, New Jersey has a tool that's strictly for regulatory purposes, and it drives permitting of emitting facilities in the state. Maryland has one. Um,
Great.
as yeah, and one more, Michigan, and I think Michigan is primarily for educational purposes. There's no legislative
I
requirements
see.
for agencies to use the tool. Yeah, it's a mixed bag out there.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you so much.
sure.
One of the big things that we have also learned from the other states have implemented is how important it is to rely on state derived data. I don't think it's a mystery to most in this group about how there are many federal tools that were used that are no longer available for various reasons. And one of the big lessons learned that we're taking in for Oregon is to, as much as possible, use Oregon derived data so we have that reliability that it's going to be available tomorrow and years from now. So we're building it so that it's sustainable, but also resilient to changes that may be happening outside of Oregon as well.
I think that's a great lessons learned. Thank you.
For community engagement, we are going to be taking a multi-pronged approach. And for the first round, which closed, about a month ago, we used two strategies, listening sessions and an environmental justice community survey. The legislation requires that the council hosts 6 throughout Oregon by implementation. And as of now, 2 have been hosted. The first one is in Astoria and the second one in Woodburn. And from those listening sessions, our community engagement team is working on some reporting to highlight themes coming from the communities that we spoke to. One of the interesting dynamics with the listening sessions that we noticed is based on the recruitment strategy that we use that prioritize community safety and confidentiality, we were able to engage with a large Spanish speaking audience. And we also were able to work out more effective processes about how to work with interpreters and how to collect information in multiple languages. The community survey was done in 2 languages, English and Spanish, and it was open for about a month and a half. The scope is statewide, and we received feedback from all over the state, 164 total responses. The intended audience for this particular tool to collect community feedback was people who live and work in Oregon or over the age of 18 and people who meet the definition of environmental justice community. The reason why this survey was so important is we fully recognize that we're not going to be able to get a good sense of the whole state by just visiting 2 communities. So we wanted to create a feedback mechanism early in the project so that we can learn from communities we didn't get a chance to visit yet. For future community engagement, one big factor that really impacts how we're going to go about things is that in this biennium, the Environmental Justice Council was not able to secure funding for community engagement for the remaining 4 listening sessions. And because we can't do the traditional listening sessions without appropriate funding, we are looking at other feedback mechanisms to learn from Oregon communities. This includes focus groups and one-on-one interviews. And we want to target communities that we are receiving less feedback from. And we hope to continue our partnership with community-based organizations. We also hope to visit people where they are in in-person events. During these events, we can help increase visibility for the project. We can promote other community engagement mechanisms like the focus group, one-on-one interviews, and surveys so that we can encourage participation from communities by creating more of a relationship with them. And here we have another hands up for any questions the group might have.
Not seeing any at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have
Oh,
gotten.
we do
Oh, okay,
have
great.
one in the chat. What are your other planned locations to seek feedback from?
Our other locations are to be determined. Some of it is really going to be based on the indicators where we need additional feedback based on some of the development work that Eric is leading with his methodology work group. And some of it is also based on where we have community relationships and where there is just more of a need to be able to build a relationship. We're really in the planning stages right now for future locations, but that is information that we do include on the Environmental Justice Council website. So once that information is available, we definitely want to make that available to the public as soon as possible. Eric, do you have anything else to add?
No, I was just thinking we need a really great environmental justice tool to help us identify which communities we should go
Right.
visit.
Good point. And the questioner, Carly, said, great, thank you in the chat, just so you know.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Do you have any more questions?
Laureen has her hand up.
Hi. Wow. Nice job, Amy. Most people don't get my name right the first time. So I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Could I get examples of what a small city is versus a large city? Because I'm thinking specifically about Eugene, which is where I'm from, and I don't know if we are small nor large.
That's a great question. Yeah, so with large city, you can think of it in terms of like metropolitan cities or, cities that have like a metropolitan planning organization. And, those tend to be cities with over 50,000 population. And then small cities are those between like 10,000 and 50,000 people or micropolitan areas. And the reason why we broke those communities out is that small cities often have a lot of the amenities that are similar to larger cities. Think of like healthcare providers, theaters, full service grocery stores. Not in all cases, but in a lot of cases. But when you look at like the economic the economies of the workers in those communities, with the small cities, they tend to be more closely related to what you would see in a rural community. So a lot of natural resources jobs, and so that's the driver for that.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question, and it might seem obvious, and I'm sure it's like phase 12. But have you considered, and I don't know if AI is a bad word or not, but have you considered once you have your model down that you put it in AI? Because then the model could be, my organization could put its specific policies in place, and then it could be more of like a recommendation for legislative things. Does that make sense?
Oh, that's a really great question. That's the first time that's come up. And so one of our goals with the website is to link policies to specific indicators so people can have examples of, ways that they might improve those indicator scores for communities. There's a tool called California Healthy Places Index that does a great job at that. And that's more of a social determinants of health tool. But, that's a conversation that we would have to have with the Institute for Natural Resources to see like what their capabilities are for using AI. But I really like the suggestion.
I also think the use of AI in conjunction with the tool would be a conversation with the Environmental Justice Council as well. So I think if this is something that is possible on the technical standpoint, being able to provide an example of how that would work. I think that's something that the Environmental Justice Council would be interested in exploring.
Thank you. And Brenda has placed a link in the chat to the EIS State Government AI Advisory Council for future reference.
Awesome.
Not seeing any more hands up
Great.
or items in the chat.
Thank you. When we get the presentation to Amy, all of you who are interested in looking at this presentation will have access to links to various resources that we believe could be helpful to better understand the tool and to see the progress. There is a dedicated project page for the Environmental Justice Mapping Tool, and that is linked to the Environmental Justice Council website, which is also available. We also are including the indicator criteria. As we are in the middle of the indicator development process, it's a helpful tool to reference to see how indicators can continue to make the cut or not be able to meet it. We also reference House Bill 4077. The survey frequently asked questions to give an example of the types of tools and resources we're making available to communities. We have the survey flyer. For those who are interested in learning a little bit more about the decision points that have been adopted, we have a link to a document that provides a summary of all of the adopted decision points. And lastly, the report that Eric was mentioning a bit earlier in the presentation for NASM, that's also available for reference. And this is actually our last substantive slide, so our last opportunity to take questions.
I don't see anything in the chat or any hands up. So I can go ahead and begin closing the session if you're ready.
Yes, we wanted to also share our contact information in our very last slide. And I want to express my appreciation for being invited in this space to share our project. This project has so many different parts and unique dynamics that it's really great to be able to share with other project managers in the state so that ultimately we can have more folks who have awareness of our project and might be able to tune in if it's something they're interested in. Thank you again so much, Amy, and for the introduction and inviting us. And I would like to pass it to Eric before we pass it back to you.
Okay.
Yeah, Amy, I'd like to second what Vaughn said. Thank you so much for inviting us, and thank you for, PMUG for having us. I'd like to say we can't do this work or wouldn't be able to do this work without all of the support that we receive from the state agencies, plus some of our local partners too, like Metro and Multnomah County Public Health, and then our academic partners at Portland State University, University of Oregon, and in particular, Oregon State University. So appreciate all the staff support that we receive from your agencies, and just thank you so much.
Thank you. And it's very fascinating to learn all of the steps that are involved to this very worthwhile project. And we just thank you for all of your efforts in doing so. And Vaughn, you can stop sharing your screen if you'd like.
I
And
apologize. I thought I
no
stopped sharing.
worries. You're totally fine. I just wanted to make sure you knew you were still sharing. And folks have shared that thank you, and they look forward to seeing how this evolves. And thank you both. And now I'll go ahead and begin closing the meeting. Thank you. We hope that you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you to all who have attended and to Van and Eric for their presentation. I'm going to post a link to a short survey to provide feedback in the chat that will help us improve future PMUG experiences and to nominate yourself or a colleague as a future PMUG speaker. You can look for a follow-up email with links to resources, and please share with your team members and those who may not be on the PMUG listserv to reach out to Amy Croucher. If you're interested in becoming an OPMAB member, visit the OPMAB website posted earlier in the chat. And if you're interested in learning more about business analyst processes or the Agile Community of Practice, visit those websites also posted earlier in the chat. Enjoy the rest of your week, and PMUG will convene again in September. Thank you so much. Bye.